39. So I'm going to introduce Rebecca Lepala from OSAP as our first presenter. Rebecca is going to be presenting on COVID-19 adaptations in the prevention system.
Great, and I'm going to make sure I practice sharing my screen, so hopefully this will work. Oops, my presentation went away. Hang on just a sec. All right, so can you see my slideshow?
No.
Okay. Let me try this again.
Good morning, everyone. While Rebecca is getting her slide together, if you are joining us with multiple people on one computer, if you can let us know who's all with you, that would be very helpful. Thanks so much.
I think the problem I'm having here is that I cannot see both my screens at the same time, and this is a little bit different than when I was practicing yesterday. If I mail it to the COOP team, can you pull it up for me? I apologize.
No worries, I have it right here, Rebecca. Let me just
Thank
pull
you so
that
much.
up real quick. Right. Does that show up for everybody?
Yes, yes,
Great.
thank you.
Let me know when you want me to move forward.
Okay, sounds good. Well, the purpose of this presentation is adaptations in the prevention system, and using Zoom is one of them. So you can see that it's an ongoing adaptation. I think we're ready for the first slide. Next slide. The things we wanted to cover this morning were some of the key issues: allowable and unallowable costs, our expectations during the pandemic, what has not changed, and finally we'll have time for a few questions and answers. If they're really detailed questions though, we're probably going to ask that you ask them, and we will record them and get back to you with a written answer. Okay, next slide please. The first thing we wanted to cover was allowable costs. All your previously allowed and budgeted costs are still allowable right now. And in addition, there's some specific COVID-related costs. Things that you didn't have in your budget, perhaps like Zoom subscriptions and other subscriptions to communicate with your partners and coalitions, are allowable. And then communication costs such as running a hotspot so that people have access to the internet, and mobile phone recurring costs, those are also allowable. Minor accessories such as computer mouses and keyboards are allowable, and supplies for personal protection if needed for work, things like masks and gloves and face shields, things like that are also allowable. Next slide. There's still unallowable costs, of course, and the biggest category of those remain are tablets, computers, and phones. And if you've been an OSAP provider, you know that that's because of the state policy on these things that makes it very, very difficult for us to allow anyone to buy. And so it's actually the BHSD policy not to. Office furniture is also falling into that category. We understand that people need a place to work at home, but unfortunately our funds can't be used for that. If there's anything on this list that you have questions about, or if there's something that we haven't talked about and you have questions, ask your program manager before you buy anything, so that we can clarify whether it's going to be allowable or not. Next slide, please. The next thing I wanted to cover was our expectations in the pandemic. All of you had your SOWs written, or at least heavily in process of being written before we really realized how long we were going to be in this pandemic and working from home. So we wanted to go over a few things. Our first expectation is that you stay safe. So please observe all the public orders from the state and your locality when you're doing your work. If there's curfews in your area, please observe those. Please wear masks when you're dealing with folks, do social distancing, and do all those things that will keep you safe. The next thing is to make sure we keep in contact with you. We need to have updated contact information. For example, at the state level, not all of us had work mobile phones before, and now we all do. So we've changed our signature lines so that you now have our numbers that you can reach us at. It's probably less likely that your emails will change, but if they do, please let us know that too, just so we know how to get a hold of you. On the scope of work, we'd like you to continue trying to proceed with as many strategies and deliverables as you can in your scope of work. But we realize that there's things have changed and it's getting harder to do some things, especially things that require in-person contact. So if you cannot work on a particular strategy, please let us know and we'll work with you on that. Next slide, please. Another issue that we'd like to set as an expectation is communication. And we do need to stay in regular contact with you. If you have a monthly meeting or telephone contact with your program manager, please keep doing that. A lot of the people I work with, we have regular meetings, so we stay in contact that way as well. If you have staff whose duties need to adjust because of medical reasons or family reasons as we're starting school, or quarantine requirements, if you come into contact with someone who had been exposed to COVID, please let us know just so we know what's happening there. We understand people are making adjustments, but we just want to know about where you are and how you're doing. And then finally, let us know if you're running into any unanticipated challenges or barriers. So if something comes up or you can't work with a partner, let us know that as well. We'd also like you to continue billing as you normally do in STAR. The invoice dates are the same, the 1st and the 16th of each month. And we're reviewing them and we're, I think, past all the little wrinkles that come every year when we set up a new fiscal year. But that we'd like you to continue billing as usual for the costs you're incurring. Finally, we wanted to talk just for a few minutes about what's not changed. We are available. All of the OSAP team is still working. We're working from home, but we are available and happy to work with you. The second thing that's changed is the importance of your work. The need for prevention and harm reduction services is only increasing. And we're going to see that later today in 2 presentations that are kind of showing that things are not getting better. We're not going to be out of work anytime soon. And the final thing is our appreciation for the work you're doing. We know it's really, really hard to work from home, and we know this is really, really challenging. And we very much appreciate everything you're doing. It's amazing what's still getting done. And so we really, really appreciate that. And that's all we have, unless we have a few questions and answers that we can answer real quick. And I've not been looking at the chat. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Then I'll turn it back over to Karen.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next presentation is by Contretta Endwarrior from the New Mexico Prevention Workforce.
Hello, everyone. I believe I just got the screen share access, so just give me a second. Okay. Do you have, you're able to see my, okay, cool.
Yes.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Contretta Enwoyer, and I am the program or the training manager for New Mexico Prevention Workforce Training for the New Mexico Prevention Workforce Training System with Kumama Consulting. And so I would like to start out today with policy updates. One of the things that we wanted to update was a five-day cancellation. So as you can see, there's 5 business days to cancel from your registration. In place of this was 3-day registration still in place. Before we had a 3-day cancellation policy, and unfortunately that was just not enough time for us to be able to get materials ready or get things ready for all the registered participants. With 5 business days, we're going to be able to do that a lot better. And then also we have online training completions. So if 2 online trainings are not completed, participants will be required to pay for the next training in order to register for another online training. I can go into a little bit more detail on that in my next slides. So one of the things that we've had to adjust to was live web-based training. This is as close to in-person as we can possibly get. It requires participants to complete training in real time. So everything is set up as if it were an in-person training. So just to give a little overview on that, and then I'll give a little bit more detail here. So preparation, as we started to transition to live web-based training, we did want to note that there's important steps for preparation. So plan or schedule for the day as if it was an in-person training. It's not ideal to multitask or do other work while being in this training because much of your attention will be required. Making sure that you have reliable internet is highly recommended. That will definitely lessen some communication issues that may occur. Also, fully read the training information emails and attachments to minimize difficulties logging on the day of the training. We do send quick start guides. We do give very in-depth and thorough information of the platforms that we use. And right now, what we use is Adobe Connect. So if people are not familiar with that, the information emails will be extremely helpful in how to download and how to connect properly. Also, active participation, so webcams. We highly, highly, highly recommend everyone use webcams. It just really helps integrate that in-person type training when you can see people face to face. Of course, if you need to step away or go to the restroom, like that's fine. But we do highly recommend the webcams to fully engage and get that participation. There's also activities that will be happening throughout the training. With Adobe Connect, we are also able to do polls, Q&As, and questions, so people aren't just staring at a screen all day. And it's also really important to complete the evaluations as soon as you receive an email. They are completed online. We do not send out certificates until all evaluations are complete. So once you get that email, we ask that everyone please fill those out as soon as possible, because we do not send out certificates until we receive all those evaluations. And so for the online training, so online training is training based entirely online with no real-time interaction. We do have a facilitator in the online training, but the online training is based off of a set time and can usually take to about 6 hours to 10.5 hours to complete over a set amount of days. So that's the difference between the live web-based training and the online training. So a little bit more information for the online training registration. You can register 3 business days prior to the start date of the training. Again, 5 business days to cancel your registration. So again, just getting everybody used to the 5 business days instead of 3 business days to cancel. That's really, really important, especially in creating the online and live web-based trainings. So for our trainings, the trainings will take the time stated in the description. In the description of all of our online trainings, we do let everyone know the amount of time it should take you to complete the online training. Again, since they are over a set amount of days. We also ask that you please complete all assignments. Those are required in order for you to receive your certificate. There is I guess you would say a big assignment that everyone completes at the end, for example, a PowerPoint. So if you were to complete that PowerPoint the day the training ends, it takes a little bit of time for the facilitator, excuse me. It takes a little bit of time for the facilitator to actually give feedback and grade in a way your PowerPoint. So they may, even though the training is only for a set amount of days, it may go a little bit more extra days than the days allotted, just because of that feedback and for the giving the facilitator time to be able to fully give back feedback and information on your final assignment. Please also know that you can contact a support or trainer or the facilitator who is in charge of the online training. They are available through phone or email. So even though it is not face-to-face or in real time, the facilitator is always a reach away, and they can definitely answer and help you with any questions that you may have on assignments or information that you may not understand. So completion, we ask that everyone logs in and completes pre-tests by the 3rd day of the training. If they do not log in or complete the pretest by the 3rd day, they are considered a no-show, and then that counts towards 1 incompletion. So again, 2 incompletions for an online training result in required payment for the next training. So after 2 times, someone didn't log in or didn't complete their pretest by the 3rd day, they will be considered an incomplete. After 2, then they will have to pay the cost amount of the training, their 3rd time. On that 3rd time, once they pay the 3rd time after the 2 incompletion, it will reset. So it's not like they have to keep paying again and again and again. It'll just be that 3rd time after the 2 incompletions. So now I want to take you to our resources on our website. And let me see. Okay. So this is our website. And are you all able to see it? Okay. So the Zoom video cams are on the side and kind of taking up my space. Okay. So this is our website. It looks a little different if you haven't seen it lately. Right here is our policies, registration policies, attendance, cancellation, payment, scheduling changes, and certification and hours. So any of your policy information can be found here. Here's the about, which talks about our training system, how to register, logistics, training levels, and how they're set, certification, training evaluations, and we also have our trainer bios. We try to put bios for each of our trainings that we have available. And if you just click on the training registration, I'll click on it real quick. It'll take you directly to all of our training information and what we have available for trainings. So I want to take you back to the homepage. And okay. So here on the subscribe, we definitely encourage everyone to subscribe. This is where you will be able to receive new quarter information, new schedule information, new training information as our quarters are set. We do not give out personal information, so this is definitely a resource to be available to you to get immediate training information. We also have the training brochure downloadable right here. So if you want to look at a brochure PDF version, you can download the brochure right here. These are just some quick links to cancellation, payment, core team, if you want to know if you're a core team member. These are our capacity building resources. They are available as you need. They are not facilitated. And since they are not facilitated, continuing education hours are not available for them. They're more for capacity building. And again, they are not facilitated, but the resources are meant to help build capacity. And that is pretty much the end of our website. Again, this is just to the left here, just talks about evaluations, and those who complete evaluation are able to receive a drawing or be able to have it be in a drawing for a gift card. And that is it. Let me take you back to my presentation. And I am just on the last slide now. So again, please contact us if you have any questions or need any information. This is our email address for registration support, and then below is our email address for payment certificates and training locations. Again, please subscribe for training announcements that will be given out immediately once we have them. And that is my presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Contretta. We appreciate that. We're a little ahead of schedule, folks, so we were just trying to figure out what we should do. And I had actually suggested that we might try and take a poll. So Andrea, is that an option? And maybe then we can take the poll and then take our break and start back up and see what the results are when we come back.
That sounds like a good plan, Karen. So I've launched the poll. Everyone should be able to see it on their screen now, and we'll take a few moments to let everyone participate. The poll question is, during COVID-19 related restrictions, how many New Mexico community surveys in person and online were you able to collect? The answers for this poll will be anonymous. It's simply to gauge how many New Mexico community surveys were collected and how many communities were able to continue collection and what that looks like.
So shall we leave the poll up for during the break and let folks have a chance or to complete it? Or how much time would you need, Andrea, to compile it?
It looks like we have about 62% of our participants having answered the poll already. So yes, Karen, if you'd like to take a break and give people time to participate, that would be great.
And then maybe we can come back in say 10 minutes. So I've got 9:26. We could come back at 9:36. Is that good?
Great.
Sounds great.
But there's no need to log off of your computers. You're just able to step away, come back, participate in the poll, and we'll see you then.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back, and hopefully you all had a chance to take the poll. And obviously the question is about how many New Mexico community surveys were you able to collect? And so Andrea is going to let us know what the results of the poll were.
So we should be able to see my screen now with the poll results. It looks like 6 out of 55, we had 55 people respond to the poll in total. It looks like 6 of those programs, or 11% of programs, were unable to collect NMCS data this year due to the challenges and restrictions. 22% collected less than 150. 29% of respondents were able to collect 150 to 300 surveys. That seems to be the majority of respondents were able to collect between 150 and 300. 27% of programs were able to collect between 301 and 500. 7% 501 and to 650. 2% 651 to 1,000, and we had one program who collected more than 1,000 surveys this year.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, everyone who participated in that poll. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
So did anyone have any questions about the poll? I think that when we come to the community survey results, you're going to see that we actually were able to collect quite a few surveys. And so we have some pretty interesting and impressive results. I wanted to point out a comment that was on the chat. So let me back up, see if I can find that. I believe it was from Rebecca. And Rebecca had said that she had checked with the New Mexico Credentialing Board and was told that all online classes will count as in-person trainings during the pandemic. So I thought that was really good news. Thanks for sharing that, Rebecca.
You're welcome. And I imagine that when things go back to normal, they'll switch that policy. But for now, it's not counting against the half of the hours that we can only do, the limit on half the hours being online.
I think it's really good news. I do see that there's a question in the chat from Stephanie asking, for those of you who collected quite a few, they wondered what the strategies were that were used. I can just tell you, just from the little bit I know, that PIRE is going to tell you about the strategies that they changed to move to the online and to really boost online strategies. And those turned out to be, I was pretty impressed with how much results we got on that regard. But maybe some of you folks who were able to get a lot of surveys might be able to reply. And I see some, Holly replied that they used Facebook and their email list. So thanks everyone for doing the poll. And I see that we've got PIRE staff on. And so we know that this year the collection was very challenging for many folks due to the COVID-19 related restrictions, and yet despite those challenges, as I said, we really were able to get a lot of surveys collected. So I appreciate everybody's work in working on the survey, and so we're going to switch right now to having PIRE do the New Mexico Community Survey results.
This is Ashley from PIRE. I'm going to start sharing my screen now and we'll begin. All right, Liz, let's see.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Can I be heard? Great. Well, good morning, and Ashley's giving I can't share my screen face. Well, I'll just start while we're pulling up the PowerPoint. I just wanted to thank everybody again for everybody's hard work in trying to get the community survey out and going this year. Our team is a much larger team than it has been in the past. And so we have Dave Curry, Marisa Elias, and I don't know if you could kind of share your screen as I call, or show your face in your video as I call out your name, just so people can see who you are. Cristina Lopez Gutierrez, Maria Elena Reyes is a new member of our team. Ashley, of course, who's sharing her screen right now. Simon Rudolph, Martha Waller. I'm not sure if she's here with us today, but she remains our fearless leader in the background. Kim Zamarin and Lei Zhang. So today we're going to talk about, and just to remind everybody, it's kind of funny in the virtual universe that we're working in, but Ashley, Dave, and Martha and Lei are all in North Carolina, and Marisa, myself, Christina, Maria Elena, and Kim, and did I forget somebody else, are all here in New Mexico. So Christina lives in the southern part of the state and outside of Las Cruces, and the rest of us are here in Albuquerque. So the changes, we're going to review today the changes in the methodology during the pandemic, and that will be very important for you all to think about as you think about changes in the data itself and the results itself. What our statewide sample is this year, we're going to look at alcohol trends, prescription drug use trends, and then we will look at the modules. So there's a new marijuana module that some providers selected to conduct this year. And there was the mental health module, which is also, we have conducted in the past, and some providers selected to add to their survey this year. And those results are especially interesting, of course, given the pandemic. And then there's the new methamphetamine module, and kind of, we had decided to add this as to all surveys that were taken online. And so because most of the survey was taken online this year, we have a really good sample of results for the methamphetamine module. And then we have open question responses, which this year, thanks to the hard work of Ashley, we actually have some coding done in time for this presentation, which we're really grateful for. So we hope that some of you will have some questions around that piece as well. We're gonna like you to send in questions in the chat while Ashley and Dave present. I'm gonna be monitoring the chat and try to answer your questions as well. And just like what Karen said before, if you have longer questions or larger questions, we can certainly respond to those by email in the future. And this presentation will be available online at the nmprevention.org website soon after tomorrow, I believe, as soon as possible. With that said, I will pass to Ashley.
Thanks.
There you go.
We're going to start off the presentation, as Liz had said, with what we learned from online data collection, because that was really, that was really unique this year. So, way back in the beginning, when the dinosaurs roamed and we weren't as worried about COVID, Pyre had planned, and we were going to execute the usual posters, flyers, putting up signs. We did get the support of the MVD, and we were going to, put up flyers in those offices. We also posted and sent out targeted Facebook and Facebook owned ads via Facebook and Facebook owned companies. So you may be aware that Facebook owns Instagram. They also own a lot of those games that we love to play on our phones. And so, you know, in any of those that Facebook owns, once you place an ad, they optimize it to reach the most people in your chosen demographic, right? So we have increased our budget from the ads for, you know, from $5,000 to $9,000, which is, you know, is a pretty significant budget increase in terms of our reach, which you'll see in a minute. And we were really specific about looking at social media conversions. And that means people that not only saw the ad, but then went from the ad to take the survey. In particular, we were looking for men. We were looking for younger people, you know, of 18 to 25. And we were looking for people in rural communities. So we made an effort from the very start. And that was, you know, kind of pre-COVID that we had, you know, made those goals. We also, you know, collected feedback from key stakeholders as well as our own social media experts here at Pyre. And, you know, because we knew that we wanted to, you know, from previous months that years that we had wanted to target these populations. Martha had also talked with some students in NMSU and had gotten some thoughts like, what do young people want to see? And based on their feedback, we edited 3 previous images to be more relevant to the population. So for example, and these are small things, but for example, we had, there's one image that had like a beer stein, and instead we put it as like a microbrew glass or something like that. Just make small tweaks, because we know when people see themselves in the ad and they identify with the ad, they'll be more likely to go directly to the survey. So we also created 3 completely new ads, and you can see them below. So this beautiful woman with the tattoo is an example, and the second slide on the left, far left. So we have a total of 19 available ads in our mix. All ads are available in English and in Spanish and are posted in both languages. We increased our number of Facebook followers to 756, and it was like 251, I think, before. So we really did well in terms of getting people, and some of that was intentional. You know, anytime anybody would make a comment like, oh, this is a cool survey, I would invite them to become a follower, which means that in future years, they'll be the first to know when the survey comes out. So that's exciting. The ads ran for 78 days, and get ready, drum roll. Okay. The ads are viewed on the screen 1,116,445 times. Woo! That's 1 million. So we've reached a total of 178,656 people. Of course, the average number of times that the people that we targeted saw the ad over the course of the entire campaign, so over the course of that 78 days, was about 6 times. So we reached out to people multiple times. In terms of one of the metrics that we look at is how much it costs to get somebody to fill out the survey on social media. And so, meaning that they go to social media links. So it costs $1.83 for a conversion from someone to see an ad to fill it out. And so that kind of gives you a sense, as opposed to, for example, if you're doing incentives in a face-to-face setting, it gives you a point of comparison. Now, with COVID, we made some adjustments, and we really appreciate everybody's feedback. And we went back to, you know, communities time and time again. So we give a presentation March 23rd to talk about best practices and suggestions. You know, this is early in the epidemic. We were like, this is what we knew has worked in the past. With the communities, Pyre co-authored an invitation letter to individuals and community organizations for electronic distribution, just saying like, hey, we're online this year. We could really use your help getting out to your groups. We helped each community revise their data collection protocol, and we really appreciate how quickly all of you pivoted. It was really inspirational to me. We surveyed evaluators about their ideas and asked what zip codes, because we knew it was going to be a problem. Not all communities are going to respond to social media, and not all communities will respond to social media in the same way. And as you see there, a sample, as you know, the sample this year differs from samples in years past. So we generated a whole lot of ideas, and I just want to mention these because I think it kind of shows the breadth and the creativity of communities. The ones that we could put in place, we did. So some ideas were, putting ads on Nextdoor, having online ads that run on popular websites like Things for Toilet Paper. Remember, this was back in March. Ad Wallet, which pays users to fill out surveys. Ways in which to amplify social media, asking students to create ads, putting ads on gaming platforms, creating radio ads. There was a lot of really great suggestions. In mid-April, Pyre engaged with an ad agency to target people on, online sites where they already were, right? Because we know that social media only reaches people who are on social media. So, and at that time, our thinking was everybody's on Target.com, Walmart.com, not everybody, but we're probably going to get a bigger reach. So we engaged a New Mexico-based ad agency and specified zip codes that the evaluators had identified as being really perhaps, anticipating that they might be underrepresented. And we monitored, each community's reach on a weekly basis. Lay was amazing at sending out updates. This community has this many, survey responses. And so we could further tweak our approach on a weekly basis to really just try to get, our first goal was to get as much representation that we could from every funded community. So that was our, first priority. And then the second priority was to get as much diversity within those communities as we could. We also, have followed up on an idea to engage opinion leaders. Sometimes they're called social influencers, in different ways to just kind of get on their radar and, hey, will you help us get the message out through your social media channels? Work on that has begun. That's a much more long-term project than something we could quickly implement. And we're going to talk with the evaluators in the breakout meeting on Thursday more about that. But it really gave us an idea of the scope and what's involved there. And we just think that was a great idea that we plan to follow up with in the future. So communities develop their own ads. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the UP Coalition and Doña Ana. This was awesome. Community health is good for you both. Give you another example. Here's two other ads that communities developed. What we learned was, pivoting to online recruitment entirely takes time. I mean, no duh. Those of us working in communities know this, right? But, there are communities that online efforts ultimately did miss. So I wanted just to be very upfront about that, and we're, continuing to think about, and we plan to talk about in other spaces within this meeting about ways in which to reach underrepresented communities this year, like Pueblos, rural communities, and some of the colleges. In terms of timing, what we learned was posting during the business day tends to be the best time with social media. And I wanted just to tell communities about, our findings with this, because it was counterintuitive to me, and also counter what I presented at the recipient meeting last year, which was that posting in the middle of the night is the best time. That is typically the best time because people, they wake up. I don't know if you're like me, I'll just self-disclose that when I can't sleep in the middle of the night, I'm on social media, I'm scrolling and I'm scrolling, it's like my own little addiction. But In fact, with the pandemic, people seem to be online and social media during the day, and that might be because they weren't in their traditional workplaces. It could be, you know, reaching out for social support. I don't know why, but I can tell you that prevention messages, and I've heard this from some of my other colleagues who do social media, that they have found this to be true as well, that prevention messages are doing better now during the business day. The most attention comes with new ads, but some ads age better than others. And some ads, this isn't a surprise, but ads do appeal to different groups. So looking at the two on your screen, which one, just think about, which one do you think applied, when I say, which one appealed to men, people who identified as male more? Okay, so I would have thought the one that says data is the tool of our trade, because it's very manly, right? Very stereotypically manly. You know, the start your morning right appealed to almost twice as many men, meaning that twice as many men saw it and were a conversion, went on to fill out the survey. Now, there's no way to say, you know, if a man's looking at both of these, which one he liked better. But in a way, we don't really, you know, we're not so interested in what they like. We're interested in how many times they go to the, you know, whether or not they go to the survey. And so the Start Your Morning Right, in fact, was one of our most popular ads for this year. So it was excellent. There's so much great creativity coming out of the communities. We also had some noticeable spikes with direct efforts. We made an appeal to, you know, directly to the communities. And when you post it on your social media, and also, you know, in some cases, people post it on their personal social media, people in communities look up to you. And, you know, you are an opinion leader, a social influencer in your own community. So it's so weird being on this end of the data with the social media metrics, because I would see that there would be a post and I would just watch the spike in data. And it was cool to see that, you know, when communities, and also when communities work with churches, you know, on a typical weekend, we would get maybe like 15 surveys done on a Sunday. And then all of a sudden we have 150. Like, what happened that Sunday? It's because someone announced it at church. So I wanted to compliment you on your efforts of really reaching out and say that they made a difference in terms of getting people with your, you know, to fill out the survey. The other thing that I just wanted to mention is that we got a lot more just general feedback on social media, people liking it, people saying, oh, this is fun. We also got some trolls. And, you know, that's what happens when you're so popular. People just want to troll you. So it does require a different management strategy. You know, in the past, we weren't getting a lot of feedback, and we also weren't really getting negative feedback. So some of the negative feedback we would get is, this survey is so long, it's so boring, or Big Brother is, you know, don't talk about drug use to Big Brother, you know, just some general misunderstandings. And we were able to, Marisa and I were able to address those pretty quickly once they came up, so that they didn't become a misnomer. And in a lot of cases, people came back and were like, oh, okay, I didn't know anybody was there, right? And so, you know, in a couple of cases, we've actually converted them to being fans of the page. So I like to say that, you know, person by person, we're encouraging, you know, people to fill out the survey, not just for this year, but in future years. And then I'll just show you our most popular ad. Sorry, I lost my, there we go. So weirdly, remember how I said that you can't ever predict? This is an oldie but goodie. I mean, I love the colors. It's pretty standard text. This was our most popular ad, meaning the ad that led to the most conversions. It wasn't necessarily the ad that we posted the most, but once we started seeing that how effective it was, we posted it more and more. So it just goes to show you that trying a bunch of different things on social media is great. That the creativity and the communities, coming out of the communities, was a real highlight for the data and for the community survey this year. And we'll switch now from talking about the social media to talking about the results. And I'll pass this over to my colleague, Dave.
Dave, I think your audio is not working. We're unable to hear you. Try again. I think we can hear you now.
Okay. Can you
Yeah,
hear
there
me?
you go.
Stefan? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that. I'm actually in my office for only the second time since this pandemic. And with that, I placed my laptop onto the docking station, and I was a little worried about that. That's why I was asking Ashley if she could give me the thumbs up. So I'm glad that's all set. I hope everyone's doing well. I think we're doing pretty good in the PIRE office in Chapel Hill, and I think things are going well from what I can tell, interacting with the PIRE folks in the Albuquerque office. And I know we are doing what everyone really needs to be doing, right, to adapt to things, and that's really the key thing. So one thing, as noted, that we really appreciate is people's very quick attention to adapting to what was happening with the community survey and what was necessary to get a reasonable sample this year. So we really thank you for all of your hard work on that. And again, being able to adapt very quickly to changing circumstances. I'd also like to start off the conversation about the quantitative data by very much thanking Lei for all of the work that she does, not just this year, but every year on those analyses that organize the data, clean it, and then work with it to get the results that we're going to be sharing with you today. So very much thankful to Lei for doing the key work on this. So going forward to the next slide. As you might have anticipated, with the shift to doing a lot more of the data collection, in fact, most of the data collection online this year, we definitely had a difference in what the typical responder to our survey looked like this year. And overall, just sort of very much generalizing, the population, the sample tended to be a bit wider, a bit older, had a bit more formal education, and was a little more female. So Ashley selected what I think is a pretty good and accurate summary picture just of the general nature of what the difference is between the sample this year and the way it looked last year. If you can go forward, Ashley. So some of the specifics are on this slide, and I'll start at the very top, and that's something that goes back to the thanking you part, which is that we were able to capture this year almost the exact same number of surveys that we had the prior year, despite these really difficult circumstances and not being able to capture data in person through all of the efforts that you normally do that way. Only a very small amount were captured that way, and to be able then to get almost the exact same number, we think is a fantastic achievement, and we really appreciate all of your help and the support from the state to support our work on that, to be able to do more and extend the time period in which we're capturing data and pay for the surveys being captured online, because there were so many more captured that way this year. You'll see in what you see up here, if you look through those numbers and compare to the 2020 to the 2019, these are just some of the key indicators relative to what was mentioned before about being more female, a bit older, a bit more white, and a bit more highly educated than the prior year. What I want to mention with all this is to reiterate, I guess, what Ashley mentioned earlier, which is that we really were not able to get to, as much as in the past, those populations that people doing these things in person are particularly good at getting to. And we know that because we can see where the deficits are here. So we had difficulty reaching as many college students on campus as in the past. And that obviously is a strong recruitment tool for that population. Capturing them in person and doing it that way is something we had difficulty replacing. We had difficulty reaching rural populations like colonias, and Pueblo communities. And that obviously is a deficiency that we wish we didn't have. We love when we have strong representation from those populations, but that was a difficulty this year. So with all that though, the analyses that you're going to see do weight for a number of these variables. So they weight to try to balance out issues that have to do with the differences in our sample this year that are due to being more female, that are due to the age differences that we see, and due to race differences. So we weight on those three variables when we come up with the estimates that you're about to see. And that's important because it does help make the information that you're going to see, these estimates, more comparable between years. But it's not perfect. And there are differences in the sample between the 2 years that are due to the change in the methodology in capturing the information that we can't account for that weighting that we're talking about. We can only account for some of the difference. So that's worth keeping in mind. It's very much worth keeping in mind as we look through the information. So the other thing I want to just say overall, because this is going to come up almost immediately, is that most of the data is from after the point where the state went into a more complete lockdown phase. So the order on that was March 23rd, I believe, and about 1/3 of the respondents came from before that point and 2/3 after. So the pandemic was very much influencing the results that we're going to see. Obviously, even prior to March 23rd, you can imagine the pandemic having influence on people and what they're doing and what they're thinking, but not quite as much as after then when there was much more of a complete lockdown. So I note that, and that's important for everyone to know as we look through this information. So looking at this slide, if we look at those first two indicators, we see that drinking was up a bit in our fiscal year 20 estimates relative to the estimates from the prior 2 years. And though if we look at the following three indicators, so binge drinking and DUI, we see that both of those things were down a little bit. And with that, I think, you can always look in hindsight, I think, and you can always come up with a reason that seems plausible. It does seem plausible that people would be drinking more due to what was going on with the pandemic, the changes in their lives, but potentially because of being in less social interaction and out less, and certainly driving less, that DUI would go down during the phase when most of our participants were participating, and binge drinking might go down as well. And that's what we see in our findings. We did do some further analyses. Lei recently did some further analyses of just the fiscal year 20 data, comparing those who responded prior to the pandemic change, that massive one on March 23rd where the state went into much more of a lockdown. So those responding prior to that point, comparing that to people who responded after that point when there was a more complete lockdown. And that pattern very much looks like the difference we see between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 19. So prior to the lockdown in this recent year, the drinking pattern was pretty similar to the prior year. It was similar to what you see with fiscal year 19. After it, though, it changed. And so some of those numbers, which I'll put out there, are in terms of the percent drinking in the past 30 days. Prior to March 23rd, it was 46%. After that, it was 52%. So you can see a pretty big rise after that point where there was more complete lockdown. Binge drinking by current users, so people who indicated using within the past 30 days, the binge drinking rate prior to that March 23rd point had been 35%. After it was 28%. So it very much went down, the binge drinking overall. Those who were drinking were less likely to be binge drinking. And the DUI also went down, 3.9% overall to 2.2%. So I think those are interesting, and I think they make the interpretation of what's happening with the fiscal year 20 data a little easier to understand. I'll also note that we're going to have a very interesting presentation on similar survey data and also quite different survey data around alcohol use that RTI will be doing later in the day. So this is a good way to be thinking of what the situation looked like New Mexico with our survey, but you're going to see some other information and there'll be further conversation around that. So going forward to some of the alcohol perceptions and actions that are relevant and worth looking at. If you look at the first three indicators here, you can see that overall enforcement activity was going down, went down this past year, and again, seems quite attributable to the changes in social interaction, that the police were less active in terms of doing things like certainly stopping people for DUI and breaking up teen parties, because simply all of that was happening at a far lower rate when there was a lockdown. That seems like a quite logical thing to expect, and I believe is what this pattern is indicative of. You also see, if you look at the access, that the access by teens went down pretty dramatically, although the one exception there is the last of the indicators on there, the percent provided, who's indicated that they provided alcohol to a minor in the past year, was up a slight bit from the prior year. Now that I'm going to mention and highlight in part because, again, those analyses that Leigh did looking at prior to March 23rd and comparing it to after March 23rd had a pretty interesting result in that when the minors who participated in the survey, when indicating where they got their alcohol from, after March 23rd, it was much higher for those who said that they had received alcohol from a parent or guardian. Again, maybe not surprising, probably not surprising, given that people were more at home and the nation and the world was going through a very unusual circumstance. But this is important to know. The figures in particular are, prior to the lockdown, 5% of the minors indicated that they had received alcohol from a parent or guardian. Afterwards, those indicating that that was a source for their alcohol was 13%. So a pretty big increase that's tied to that date when analyzing from that date backward, that date forward. I will also note here that recent data that came out really highlighted how New Mexico has the highest death rate in the country due to alcohol. So that even though we've seen you see that the things like binge drinking down a little bit due to the pandemic, et cetera, it did that percent of the population that may be doing less binge drinking might be those who are doing it out socially, et cetera. But that does not mean there are not some very serious issues that exist with binge drinking and with heavy drinking that continue to be a major issue for the state. So there is no reason whatsoever to back off in any way, shape, or form from alcohol prevention as a major consideration for the state. Okay, the next thing I think is a question that will lead us into the next phase of or a question period that can lead into the next phase, but take a question first, perhaps. Is there something, Ashley or Liz, that we should try to address?
Yes, I think we have a question. Andrea?
So Palatia has raised her hand. Tia, you're now unmuted and can ask your question.
Hi, I think I actually accidentally unmuted. Or raised my hand. I apologize.
Okay, we'll mute you back up. Thanks, Tia.
That's
You're
awesome. Tia, thanks, and well, thanks for bringing that up too. The best way to get your questions answered is on the chat. Liz is monitoring that. If it's a question just related to your community, she can write you right back or get back to you. Or if it's something that applies to all communities, then we have time set within the presentation like this to answer questions. Liz, have you seen any questions so far that apply to all communities?
A couple. I just wanted to clarify that when we talk about minors, they are minors of 18 to 20 years old. So we don't know about high school students and who are not high school students who are under the age of 18. And I also wanted to make sure that I introduced as well Emily Houses, who's a member of our PIRE team as well here in New Mexico, and she lives in Santa Fe. I don't think we have any other questions coming in through the webinar chat.
Okay, I will proceed. All right, so looking now at the prescription painkiller use behaviors. The short and dirty of this is that we didn't see major big changes in any way in what these indicators tend to look like. They look pretty similar to the past. Doesn't mean there aren't any differences. As you can see, for example, the number of days using prescription painkillers in the past 30 days was up a little bit, from around 10 to around 11 days. So there are some changes, but in general, the numbers were not as dramatic as some of what we saw with the alcohol numbers changing quite a bit. And Lay also did a pre-post analysis based on that March 23rd date, and we didn't see differences there in painkiller use attributable to that date when there was a more significant lockdown put in place across the state. So moving forward to the next one. I think with this, the couple of the take-home things that I see when I look at this are that generally people think there is a pretty significant risk associated with misusing prescription painkillers, as we'd hope. But again, that percentage that is around 10% that sees at best a slight risk does indicate that there's an important group out there that may not be as getting the message as much as they would really need to fully avoid doing this. So while a small number, it's still important. Same goes for the giving or sharing. Go back one. For the giving or sharing of prescription painkillers, while only 4%, that's still really important. I think these numbers look good generally, those first couple, but there's more work that could be done because of how important it is to try to bring these as close to zero as possible. It probably never would get to zero, but we'd like as many people as possible thinking there's a significant risk and not giving or sharing their prescription drugs. The bottom one though, the storing in a lockbox, there's a lot more room there for movement. With 58% saying they do not do that. They do not store their prescription drugs in lockbox or a locked cabinet. And so we'll note that that's a pretty important place to continue to focus on. So next slide. All right, with this, to me, the two things that really most stand out, and they're really pretty important, are the first of these indicators that's on here and the last. So with the first, having indicated that they were prescribed naloxone when they were prescribed other prescription painkillers, that's at 20% indicates there's a lot of room for improvement. But what's really important to note is that number is up from about 6% the year before. So we're seeing significant improvement, significant increase there. And while there's, again, still a lot of work to be done, it's going the right direction. Same goes for that last number that's on there. It's not as high as we probably all would like, but it's up from about 13% last year in last year's survey. So these numbers are going in a great direction. It does indicate that we're starting to make a difference. And by we, I mean all those that are working on this issue. And it's keep up the good work because there's still room for improvement, but these numbers are quite encouraging. They're going in a good direction. And we're at a poll. So I believe this poll has to do with one of our marijuana results. And there we see it. So hopefully you can see this. If you could take 30 seconds to a minute to ponder this. What we're interested in is seeing what people think we found with the results from the survey this year. Again, the marijuana module is totally brand new. So when asked this year for the first time, those people who indicated having used marijuana in the past 30 days, when asking them what their source was, what their most common sources were, we're interested in what you think came up the most. Which of these three? So please take a second to respond, and we'll see the answer shortly.
Dave, I also wanted to point out a comment that was made by Bernie, if you can take a look at that in the chat. Thank
Sure.
you.
So the comment from Bernie is that giving or sharing a controlled substance is a felony, which it is, and everyone should be bearing in mind. Older white women don't see themselves at risk for having issues with the laws. The question mark is with a question mark, and then sort of a comment of maybe not surprising. And I will note that probably, like, in terms of the age and the white versus other racial background, that is, with the weighting that we do, it does control for those issues to a large degree. The big sort of difference to bear in mind, though, is that overall, the sample from the prior year is not as reliant at all about online survey participation. And this year is. So probably the biggest difference is that we wouldn't have been able to control for in the analyses is those who we're likely to be able to reach online to participate. And so I think your comment is an interesting one, certainly, Bernie. That's the issue I would note is those who have online access versus those who don't. That's probably the clue to what we were not able to control for as well when doing the weighting. All right, could we see the results of this question? Okay, so what came in number one is buying it from someone, a friend, a dealer, a family member. And after that, purchased it with using a medical cannabis program card, and then finally purchasing it in a state where marijuana is legally sold. So I think that's really interesting, and actually there's a pretty wide spread there. So we'll see the results in a second. So if we can move forward maybe to the next slide, we'll start into the marijuana findings, and we will reach the answer to that one shortly. So with this then, the first slide about marijuana use, I think it's noteworthy that more than half of our estimate is more than half of the population has ever used marijuana. I don't think that's particularly surprising. Of that group who has ever used, right? 37% of that group say they have used within the past 30 days. That to me seemed a little surprising. So again, that 37% is not of the entire population. It's 37% of the 56% who said that they had ever used marijuana. But 37% who have used marijuana at some point in their lives 37% say that they have used within the past 30 days. And then of that group who has used within the past 30 days, 24% indicated that they had driven under the influence of marijuana. That to me indicates that that's not an insignificant issue, and one that probably warrants some attention. That's my feeling. If almost a quarter of those who are using marijuana within the past 30 days say they have driven under the influence of marijuana, I think that is something that at least gets my attention. The other thing that gets my attention is the bottom one, is shared marijuana with underage youth. It's a very low percentage saying that they have done that. I think that's a good thing. We'd love, again, these numbers to be closer to zero on things like this, as close as they can be, but that's a good number. That's a nice number, actually, to say. So going forward then, we have questions that have to do with enforcement activities around marijuana. And then we have the ease of access to marijuana by teens. And these are baseline information. It's the first time we've seen this. We don't have other years to look at with this. But to me, what stood out is the ease of access to marijuana by teens, and that 90% or so of people believe that teens have pretty easy access, at least somewhat easy. So again, maybe not particularly surprising, but noteworthy. Going to the next one. With that, the people did agree that marijuana use was a problem in the community, they thought, generally. Many were not sure, but you can see there's a decent percentage who thought, who agreed or strongly agreed that it was an issue of some concern. And a much, much higher percentages too would support local efforts to prevent marijuana use by teens. So there's good support for that issue. In terms of DUI, most really were not sure about that, whether DUI with marijuana was an issue. I think with what we saw, with what people say they do, those who are using marijuana, it does indicate that DUI with marijuana is potentially a significant issue. And this also indicates that perhaps there's good reason to try to help the public better understand the degree to which that's happening. You'll see in the bottom indicator there that there is a high degree of support for enforcement of DUI due to marijuana. And then the next slide. Okay, here's the answer to that poll that you all took. And to remind you of, well, I'll first note that what we had on that poll were the top 3 responses amongst the categories that we offered people. Those were the top 3 that were listed. But I will note, and you probably already have, that what you generally thought was the most common, which is buying it from someone, actually was not the most common. The other 2 were much more common. And actually a much higher percentage than perhaps the poll indicated you might have expected earlier, are purchasing it from out of state as well. So to me, I think what's kind of noteworthy here is the top 2 sources being listed are ones that are essentially getting it from a legal outlet in one way or another, either purchasing it in state legally or out of state, getting it from someplace where it's being sold legally. And so that's important to note as we think about marijuana issues and what access is like for those who are using. Okay, moving on to the next one. The reasons for consumption. Top couple reasons, to me, what stands out for these first number of reasons is how much they if they're not directly saying it, they're directly kind of indicating essentially what is doing it for a reason to medicate or self-medicate. So they're indicating their reasons for doing it were to cope with anxiety or stress, help sleep, medical purposes in accordance with the prescription, or addressing a medical issue without a medical prescription. So that I think is noteworthy in terms of when thinking about marijuana and what some of the issues are with it and what to be thinking about. These other reasons, like having fun with a friend or friends socially, just not as big of a thing as some of the first number of things that are up there. All interesting, especially for a brand new module. Next slide.
Okay, and Dave, I think before we start talking about meth,
Sure.
Let's pause and see if there's any questions. Liz, have there been any questions that apply to the whole group? You're on mute.
Let's start with Natalie, and because we've been responding to some of the comments in the chat stream as we go along, but Natalie has a raised hand.
Okay, can we open up her for speaking?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I just wonder about the access question related to marijuana, because in the counties that I work in, we also, using your medical cannabis program card was the highest percentage. But when looking up the actual number of people in those counties that have a cannabis card, according to the DOH, it seemed too high. So I wonder if people are using that answer when they're actually having someone else with a medical card purchase for them. So that's just a thought. And then on the second, reasons for use, statewide, it's overall the highest reason for getting a medical cannabis card is PTSD or coping with chronic pain. So we might want to add that chronic pain option in the future. Anyway, thank you so much. This is great to see these results.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, I think you bring up some good things. Should we take
Liz,
more
you're on
questions
mute.
or should we go backwards to
I think
the?
Liz has another one. She's on mute.
Sorry.
Okay.
Cindy Seckerman was asking if we looked at the reasons for marijuana use pre and post pandemic, and I don't think that we have yet, but I just wanted to kind of call that out. Natalie, I think I agree that you made a great observation, and it feels like every year when we look at these access questions, we always have to tweak it a little bit more to find out where in response to, you know, what's happening in the community. But those would be good responses to add. And then, yeah, I think there were some questions about access as well from teens. And we do have a question in the annual and the strategies for success about where you access the marijuana that you consumed that could provide that counter response. But we don't ask actually how easy is it to get access to marijuana. You could probably get that very easily through qualitative data collection, and most teams would probably tell you very easy. But that is a good idea to add as well for in the youth surveys that we have.
Excellent. Thanks, Liz. Let's move on and talk about meth now.
Okay, so as noted, these two modules are brand new this year. Should have noted with the marijuana module that the N for it, the number of respondents, was nowhere near as large as the methamphetamine module. The marijuana module was only utilized by certain communities, and I believe that N was something in the neighborhood of 3,500 answered the question about having ever used marijuana. Whereas when you look at methamphetamine, this other new module, the N is much, much larger. It's over 9,000. And that's because it was asked, this module was asked of everyone who replied on the internet. And so that's why that number is very, very large. And so this information, I think is even more reliable and more interesting in terms of giving a picture across the state. So with that, I think there's some very interesting things here. In terms of having ever used, it's the estimate that we have for that is a little over 10% of the population has ever used methamphetamine. So that estimate, like what you're looking at here with that 11%, that's what it is. It's an estimate of what we think the overall statewide number would be had everyone 18 and over in the state participated. Again, there's large caveats to that have to do with the methodology issues we've talked about earlier, but that's the general idea of what you're looking at with these numbers. That's what they're meant to come close to representing. That's why they're estimates. It's an estimate of what that is. And so 11% or so is the number that we came up with for this based upon the survey results. That the percentage then of that group, those who have ever used methamphetamine, who say that they have used within the past 30 days is 14%. So actually a pretty sizable number, pretty sizable percentage of those who have ever used indicate that they're using now. It's not huge, but 14% is still quite a big number and indicates there's an issue to be paying attention to, no question. And then if you look not just at having ever used or whether people are currently using, and look at whether people indicate that they have a family member who's used, the number gets even closer to 20%. It's at 17.5%, and thus there are a large number of respondents who have pretty direct history with methamphetamines, either in personal use or by somebody who's a part of their family. And so that's important to be thinking about when thinking about this issue and thinking about the responses. All right, let's go forward. In terms of what you see here, the first numbers really jumped out to me, that such a very, very high percentage of the respondents are indicating that they believe that the ease of access within their community is really high, and that's seemed a bit troubling. My jaw dropped at this. This was the most surprising finding, I think, of anything I saw in any of the results that we're going to look at. And I did ask Leigh to check it, and it is accurate. So to me, it gets my attention. This is a significant issue, and people perceive it as a significant issue. In terms of the risk, those numbers look more like what you might hope for. There's very small percentage who think this is not a risky endeavor. But as we saw, there's, our estimate is that over 10% of the population has done this, despite there being significant concern that it's a very risky endeavor by almost everybody. So going forward then to the next slide. In terms of acknowledging this, when directly asked about whether meth use is a problem, it's quite high. And in terms of support for increasing efforts to prevent this, extremely high. So this is really good. There's a lot of ammunition here to be using when trying to lobby for more effort, lobby for more resources within your communities to prevent this. The public is there on this. And so that's an important thing to note. All right, final of the data slides from the quantitative data is around mental health issues. This is a module that's been used in past years, but it is an optional module, so that looking at that N is important. And the N was up. It's twice as high really this past year as it was the prior year, but still it's only about a third of the overall respondents we had. And what that's indicative of is there's only certain communities which chose to include this module. So that's what this is based on, these numbers are based on. And that said, though, the numbers and the trends here are very noteworthy, and they mirror things that are being found at the national level as well. That their mental health issues are only increasing. We see that in these data. And I'll note with that first one, the first item that's on here, it talks about meeting a critical threshold for serious mental illness. This is based upon a 7-item scale that's included in the survey. So 7 items form a scale that was developed by the World Health Organization. And it's a screening scale that's meant to identify people who are exhibiting signs who indicate that they have engaged in behaviors and and may well have serious mental illness. That number is quite a bit higher in this year's estimate versus the year before, and that's an important one to be looking at and be concerned with. The percent self-identifying as having a mental health issue or a drug and alcohol problem, you can see is way up. Suicidal thoughts are up. And then in terms of having recently sought out assistance with issues like this, behavioral health issues, good news is that's up, which you'd hope to see given these other numbers, but still it's only 25%. And you have 35% who indicated that they believe that they had a mental health or a drug or alcohol problem. So there's a lot here to be thinking about, and this mirrors national trends as well. And is really important for the substance abuse prevention world because it's all part of the broader behavioral health issues that we all care about. And as we know, all these behavioral health issues are interrelated and affect each other. So to the extent that our narrow playing field is meant to be substance abuse prevention, we know that our field is related to all the others, and we care about the others, and we try to make a positive impact on all of the behavioral health issues. And we know that they affect each other. So seeing these issues going up, these mental health issues go up, is reason to really be trying to increase efforts around substance use prevention, because we know that mental health issues are tied to substance use problems and vice versa. So there's plenty, I think, in these survey results, including this right here, that are reason to be taking your jobs very seriously. There's lots of important work to do, and we hope to continue to support you with that. So I'm going to turn it over here from the quantitative results and turn it back over to Ashley, who will talk about some of the qualitative findings.
Thanks, Dave.
Can I just jump in here too as well, just to, yeah, these mental health issues are really important, and I'm wondering if we could also think about folks who responded to the survey pre and post lockdown as well, and in terms of their own mental health issues. Could be interesting, especially also considering the presentation we're going to see later today.
Okay, well, next up is a poll. Jesse, if you want to put that up on the screen, and then also I'm going to try reloading. I'm having trouble switching from slide to slide. So as people answer the poll, I will re-upload or try to reshare the slides. So if those of you who got the first question wrong, now's your chance to redeem yourself. The 2020 community survey said, is there anything else you'd like to tell us or add about the issues that we asked about today? What was most often on the minds of our participants? All right, I'll give you one more minute. Okay, do we want to put the answers up? Pandemic, yes. That would seem to me what was on the mind of our participants. Yes, and second, homelessness and drug-related trash and lack of arrest for DUIs. All right, thank you for your answers there. I believe Jesse's, I'm having trouble advancing the slides, so I'm hoping that Coop can share the slides starting on slide 28 or 29. But I'll just go ahead and talk about the qualitative responses while we're loading that up. You know, we asked in the survey, it's kind of the end of survey slush, right? What else is on your mind? And I'll say that this is not kind of a random dropping in of what's on people's minds. Like, we don't get things like my grocery list or, you know, trying to help my kid with his virtual homework or something like that. I mean, they're primed to talk about substance use issues because they have just completed a fairly lengthy survey on substance use, right? And so I think it is particularly noteworthy when people say things which are maybe somewhat adjacent to substance use. And, you know, like you, I would have thought COVID, but in fact, if you said if you said the homelessness and drug-related trash, you would be right on that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So Of the people who filled out this last question, which was optional, 2,477 people filled it out. And once we subtracted things like, thanks for the survey, or I have nothing else to say, or nada, or no, or nothing, we ended up having 2,377 comments remaining. So that was a significant number of comments, and it is an increase from all years previous. Could be a reflection of people had more time on their hands, could be that they had more to say. The comments also tended to be much, much longer than in previous years, and I found that fascinating, and that's just more great data for us. So that, of the concerns, so people talked about homelessness and drug-related trash, particularly when it intersected with, I don't want my kids to see this, or I am concerned about the safety of my pets who I'm walking through the, but, so there was that aspect of it, but there was even more overwhelmingly a real concern about, what is happening. And it wasn't COVID specific necessarily, but kind of what is happening, and people noting that they're seeing a real increase and that they are asking for more support from the state and federal governments to address the homelessness problem, and particularly as it intersects with substance use. So I saw a real concern in those findings, not just for, when trash as it impacts me and my experience as a citizen, but real concern for the people who, that they saw that they interpret as being homeless. So we also saw that law enforcement was a really big concern. As in the years past, we have some supportive comments about law enforcement, but the trend continues, that's suggesting frustration over the lack of enforcement related to substance use laws. So we got a lot of things like, the best way we can handle substance use in New Mexico is to enforce the laws we already have on the books. That was particularly common with DUIs related to alcohol. So no one mentioned DUIs related to marijuana specifically, but many people mentioned DUIs with relationship to alcohol and frustration over the lack of enforcement of those, and about the lack of consequences, and we got a whole lot of personal stories about, family members who had been harmed, because of DUIs for people of which that was a multiple offense for them. And as you might expect, what else, was going on in our nation at the time of the community survey? Well, we, really had a national dialogue, increased national dialogue about community policing and the disparate outcomes in communities of color. And so this emerged in the qualitative comments as a new theme for 2020, which was there was a desire for a decrease in the criminalization of drug abuse. In the past, I've seen that mostly with, related to marijuana, but this was more, jail doesn't doesn't stop substance use. Treatment stops substance use, and let's stop putting people in jail and calling that treatment. There were, slightly more, about a third more people who supported less criminalization of drug abuse. And as you've probably seen in your communities, there's also kind of, I'll deem it a backlash of people who wanted to see more criminalization, well, we just need to lock these people up. And so I think what's important to note here is not necessarily the number of comments, because remember, this is an optional question and people can talk about whatever they want. And they did, but just to see that this is an issue that's on many people's minds about the criminalization of drugs and what should happen for people who get caught with substance abuse issues. As in previous years, there remains a desperate call for substance use treatment options. And, really it was just, we had over 100 people like, where is the treatment in New Mexico? And when I say I characterize it as a desperate call, I mean a desperate call. And so, and that's something I'm sure that, we all feel in our communities. One thing to remember is that while, you know, this is an anonymous survey, and so we don't have identifying information to follow up with individuals that fill out the survey, but we do, PIRE provides, you know, an option to, you know, for a New Mexico crisis phone number and a website for people who are experiencing, you know, issues or like information about treatment options. And so, you know, to the extent that that can be effective, that is, you know, that is provided. Legalizing marijuana, it's been a, you know, hot topic in the past, continues to be a hot topic. However, and this could reflect our sample. So I think, you know, you just kind of take it for what it was. But in the past, anyone that wrote about marijuana basically was in support of legalization of that. In 2020, we did not see that same. So in 2019, 25 people wrote about marijuana, all wanted to legalize it. In 2020, 110 people wrote about marijuana, and only 80, you know, recommended legalizing it, and 30 were against that. So, you know, so the number of people talking about marijuana was higher, and also there's a slight, you know, there was some change in the support for legalization of marijuana. It's much more nuanced with people kind of on both sides for and against legalization. And lastly, I just
mentioned, Ashley, that you know, this is the first year that we actually had the marijuana modules. So frequently when I looked at those responses in the end, kind of like the last question that you just answered frequently seems to kind of influence how people end up making a commentary later. So
yeah, that's a good point. And it's, so for the people that included the marijuana, it was definitely later, depends on what else they selected, whether or not it was the very last module before they filled that question out. But yes, good point, Liz. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that, you know, particularly this year, and at the time we did the survey, this open field of comments that we really saw people kind of using it to tell their stories, and almost in a therapeutic way, in ways that I have not seen in previous years. I think it makes sense, you know, social isolation, people are, you know, reaching out in whatever ways. I think people may have more time, maybe had more time on their hands. I think the sample that we selected may be more used to therapy kinds of language, and so maybe more comfortable with self-disclosure. I think all of these things add in, but it was a surprise to me to see the level of private information people would disclose in a anything else you want to tell us, you know, kind of question. And I think it really speaks to the needs and emphasizes some of the quantitative data about the real need we have out there for mental health treatment, and kind of, you know, where we were, you know, as a community, as a state, during the time, you know, that we collected this data. So with that, I will woman the chat here, and Liz and Dave will conclude our presentation, and I'll woman the chat to see what questions remain.
I will just note that we have a recap of some of the main things we covered with some of the bullets that we wanted to get to today, that we showed you at the beginning. All of this that you see up here in terms of the recap should ring true to what you've heard us talk about, et cetera. So I don't think there's reason to go through it. But I do think overall, and hopefully you have the same impression, there's some interesting things, and I think some valuable things that are in the survey results that tell us about what was happening, largely during a time that was quite unusual, but it's also very recent. That can help inform a time that is also expected to be and is quite unusual. So I think there's some things to be learned from all that. And I think the adding of the marijuana and methamphetamine modules was provided some very interesting information, particularly to me, the methamphetamine module. So I'll just mention those. Liz, do you have thoughts as we just move to any general questions or comments before we end.
Oh, I just wanted to say that there have been a number of really great comments that are coming in on the chat function, and I'm grateful for all of them. And I think we will. This is actually kind of a better context in a lot of ways to make sure that everybody's able to kind of contribute and provide feedback. And I think there's some really great thinking going on as well about how these data can be used beyond evaluating your program, and especially in working with your coalitions and working within your communities. So advocating for increased mental health services for folks who get caught for DWI, for example, is that those may not be within, you know, the range of your particular scope of work, but as you work in coalition with your community partners, think about how these data can go, can actually help make that change. I would also say that, you know, these are state level data, and be mindful of kind of where the state, where some of these modules were collected, and hopefully I believe we have that in the finding sheet that Dave sent out previously. So there's kind of two formats for these data. So there's this presentation as well as the finding sheets that look like your community level finding sheets. So we've had great insight as well as to additional analysis that we can do and additional questions. So I thank all of you for that. And so there's some discussion about benzos. Anyway, this has been terrific. I don't know if anybody else on our team wants to say anything as well, but this is thanks once again to you all and the community survey. You made it, and you made it happen, and you make sure that it gets out to your communities, and we're thinking really hard about how to make sure that we can get it out to everybody in the ways that we were able to before. And so with that, I don't know if we have any kind of closed questions here.
Liz, I'll add one that has come up just now. So I wanted to invite everyone, you know, to really participate. We look at the community survey questions each year and make revisions. So we include new things, we drop things. I know there's a real sensitivity about the survey being probably right at the max of what is the attention level of, you know, someone just taking a survey. So, you know, we unfortunately can't add questions about absolutely everything, but we are pretty strategic and inclusive about what goes on in that survey. And so that time will be coming up pretty soon, Dave. You might speak about that, where we'll be asking for input about, you know, what else do we need on the survey? What do we not need? And so we just welcome everybody to participate in it then. But the questions that are asked, you know, are really a consensus among key stakeholders there.
That's a great point, Ashley. And just to say that, you know, so the core survey itself covers the essential questions that programs need to evaluate their work. And then we develop modules that people can select to add on. And then folks in the past have been able to also add additional questions to their survey according to the site ID. It's a remarkably complex operation. And we're grateful once again to our technical team who's able to kind of work in response to every single community's requests and add those modules. But just to reinforce what Ashley is saying is that in the SCOW every year, we address changes to the modules and changes to the surveys. We try to keep it as short as possible, the core survey itself. But that is also why there's some of these additional issues are not addressed. But
Can
anyway.
I ask a question?
We have two raised hands. We have Cindy has had her hand up for quite some time. So, and then Bernie. Cindy is you're unmuted.
Thank you. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing the data. I think some of our communities, especially a lot of mine, were heavily impacted this year. And so it's nice to see some data, even though a lot of their data is missing, especially for tribal communities. And so thanks for that. I wanted to also focus on, I would normally try to include the mental health component in there at least every other year, if not annually, depending on what other modules we include. And that's because everything is so interrelated. And I think based on some of the comments that always, come up in a variety of evaluations and research, not just this one, we still have a lot of education that needs to happen, a lot of awareness to be, increased throughout our community, especially with looking at substance use as a chronic disease. There's so much effort going on in educating providers and even medical students now, so that they can be able to treat someone without all the judgment. And obviously there's still a lot of need out in the larger community. And then the third point that I wanted to make is I am so glad that that meth component has been included. I've been hearing about meth in all my communities, not just tribal, but like Cibola has a lot, Gallup has a lot, I mean, just all over law enforcement data. And we don't really have a lot of funding for that, or a lot of strategies that are being implemented in the state. And, I think working with a lot of treatment and law enforcement, I keep hearing there's a lot of money going into the whole opioid thing, but if we hear about that one more time, because what they're really seeing is a lot of increase in meth. So I am so glad that some of that is out there right now, that we have some baseline data. I think a lot of the times we kind of rush in after things get started, really take off. And so I'm glad that, we're looking at it now. And hopefully we'll start addressing it in the state. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. We also have Bernie.
Hi. Thanks. So first of all, the thing about methamphetamine is that, guess what the number one thing it produces is
energy, motivation, dopamine.
Sorry,
the
Bernie.
other thing is, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Did you hear my comment about methamphetamine and euphoria?
Could you repeat it one more time, please?
Well, methamphetamine causes euphoria. People are seeking euphoria right now. It's not surprising that there is an increase. It's also very pure and very cheap. And so the one thing that I really wanted to say was about benzodiazepines. Alprazolam is implicated in more overdose deaths in New Mexico than any other substance. And benzodiazepine prescriptions are increasing, and benzodiazepines interaction with alcohol, opioids, and other respiratory depressants really drive our overdose death rates in New Mexico. And I think it's conspicuous that benzodiazepines are not a part of this, where, it's interesting to see stuff about marijuana, but marijuana doesn't kill you. So it would be interesting to see if we could, not just on this survey, but on the YRRS, also include benzodiazepines in the future. Thanks.
We have one more raised hand, and then I believe Ashley has a closing comment, and then we better move on. Okay, this question is from John, and John, you are unmuted.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. No, it was just more of a comment of like, this is just something that I think everybody at the state is seeing, is that we're seeing everyone's bringing up meth, and a lot of bringing up marijuana as well, because it's kind of being, a lot of people are treating it like it's already legal. And a lot of the marijuana stuff, it tends to be pushed on the internet and on alternative sites as possibly, well, this is so much better than the prescription, so take marijuana. So we got a lot of people, especially a lot of kids, getting in trouble because they think, it's better to smoke marijuana than take my anti-anxiety medication or take my ADHD medication. It's just, marijuana is just better. So I know there was a concern in my area about that being the prevailing kind of wisdom in the community, is that it's better to be using marijuana than it is to be using the stuff the doctor gives you. But then of course meth has always been, and I live on the border, so meth is even more plentiful here on the border than it is as it goes up, because it's even cheaper down here. Because we're right across, we're almost like, going to the factory and buying the car. Our factories are right across the border, so people get that. But yeah, I think those are the two things that I think we're all here in the community, is a lot of people are talking about meth, and then in my community, marijuana keeps being brought up as something that it has to do with the kids, not having to do with legalization or medical marijuana or anything above, as adults, is the use by the children. And then vaping as well, it being used as vaping being used as kind of the conduit for the smoking of the marijuana.
That's a good point, John. And I saw that too, concern about kids and kids seeing parents use and kids, using with marijuana in the qualitative comments as well. I wanted to kind of point out as well is that, this is the survey asked about experiences and also perceptions. And so I think that can be really powerful for prevention programming. So for example, if there's a community concern about homelessness and trash related to homelessness, how could that be part of, let's say, a social media campaign or a billboard campaign, or, something like in what ways can you incorporate that, perceptions? I know with law enforcement, for example, several people brought up in the comments that, that there's a real problem with district attorneys following through with law enforcement. The perception in the community, while a few people mentioned that, but the perception among our participants is that the problem lies with the law enforcement. And so even just being aware of that, I think can be really powerful, in the ways in which we approach prevention in communities. And so I just wanted to echo Liz's, great and Dave's great thanks. And you were all incredibly helpful and responsive to us and to your communities. And I think that this effort could have been, it could have just gone the way of, well, we're just not going to do it. This is a weird year, we're just not going to do it. And we, collectively were able to pull off something that, while it has limitations and differences, like we have some continuing data, we were able to learn new things about our communities and about new populations. And so, we ended up with something that's really valuable. And I just wanted to thank you all.
And one final shout out to OSAP and Karen Shaman, who was able to get some additional resources to help make sure that that we were able to do the big push online. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ashley and Dave and Liz and the whole PIRE team. Obviously, it was well worth the investment, because this survey is always so amazing and beneficial and provides us with lots of very important and useful information. So thanks for a great job. And we have no idea how long this situation is going to last. So perhaps a lot of these lessons learned will translate into the next survey. And we'll be all the better equipped to do it again. So thank you very much. We're going to move to a provider highlight now, and we're going to hear from the UP Coalition in Doña Ana County, and they're next. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Karen. Alicia Myrick. I know my name is spelled Alyssa. You actually say Alicia. I'll never get upset with any of the A's, really. I know my name is legally spelled wrong. So I am the manager of the prevention department with the Center for Health Innovation. And I'm here with Michelle Rincon. She's the new OSAP coordinator here in Doñana County with CHI. She just took over about a month ago, and in FY20, I was actually coordinating. I also want to let you know, just please take a look at the chat. I'm posting, I just hit send on that. There's a legend you'll want to briefly go over. So some of the presentation that we're about to do makes sense to you, so you're kind of familiar with some of that. And I'll go ahead and let you know who our presenters are going to be. So first up, we'll have Dr. Ned Rubin. He is the Unified Prevention Coalition's chairperson. He also serves on our communications committee. And then we have Amy Biesing. She is our token pharmacist on the committee, and she is wonderful. She's going to be presenting with us as well. She's also on the communications committee. And then retired veteran OSAP coordinator, Athena Huckabee, is joining us as well. She works with the communications committee, and she's now the community outreach coordinator with Ideal Option. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Rubin.
Ladies and gentlemen, and now for something completely different, a fairy tale for preventionists. A journey to slay the opioid dragon. Once upon a time in the southern land of enchantment, bordering a foreign country, the land of Chihuahua, there was a queen who ruled alongside a round table of esteemed representatives. There came a great affliction onto the people of this land. A shadow was cast over the countryside. The woes of the kingdom and the beginning of the saga. The shadow was caused by a large beast, a beast known as Oxy the dragon, who was terrorizing the land. And the cost to the kingdom was great. As a result, the kingdom was losing 18 subjects a week to his fiery breath. There had been tales of previous dragons passed down through generations, but the kingdom had never experienced a scourge like this. The dead left behind holes in the fabric of the community. It was quickly becoming clear that the kingdom needed a battle strategy.
Battle strategy, how to slay the dragon. The battle plan and the Queen's proclamation. The Queen sat at dinner with the royal family and discussed the deadly invasion. They pondered how to teach the kingdom to stay safe. Aha, another handbook. You see, this would not be the first time the royal family had used this battle strategy. They had recently created a handbook to guide the town's medieval physicians in the kingdom's dragon war. We shall adapt the physician's handbook for the people. Hear ye, hear ye. The Queen hereby proclaims that the Queen's advisors shall adapt the kingdom's physician handbook to aid the people in protecting themselves, their families, and their homes. The best laid plans. The Queen's advisors voiced concern that it may not be practical to mimic the physician's guide, as it was, physician-y. There were too many words, no pictures, confusing facts, and well, it was physician-y. The Queen assured them that they would be able to make it work. The advisors did their best to carry out the Queen's proclamation in a timely manner. With as much pride as they could muster, they sent it to the round table for review and feedback. The members of the round table were quick to echo the concerns of the advisors. The Queen acknowledged their concerns and decided to take the matter to the kingdom's people. Meanwhile, Oxy continued to breathe fire over the kingdom. Then what? After the proclamation was carried out and the talking was done, it seemed the dragon would soon be dead. And here was what the handbook looked like. Where are the pictures? Must there be so many words? Are we supposed to know what these symbols mean? How boring is this? Pitchforks and torches. Under disguise, the queen and her trusted consultant presented the handbook to the people. The people literally ripped up the book and rearranged it in a form that suited them best. They demanded changes be made to the handbook's content, color, scheme, language, layout, and graphics. The queen and her advisors regrouped. Alas, the queen finally understood what her advisors and the round table had been trying to tell her. The queen and her advisors then met in coffee shops throughout the kingdom over a fortnight. They redesigned the handbook to reflect the people's demands, a product for the people and by the people.
Yes, a handbook for the people and by the people. Now the dragon would surely die. Now that the handbook was finished and printed in all of its colorful, informative, easy to follow, culturally appropriate glory, it was time to discuss a dissemination plan. Get the town crier. The advisors decided it best to go to the town criers in each area of the kingdom to ask for their help. The outreach had commenced. The town criers organized sessions across the land to share handbooks with all the people. The people cheered with delight as they learned how they could help slay Oxy the dragon. This feeling of empowerment trickled throughout the kingdom. Momentum was building, but the story does not end here. The plague. Then, as if they were not dealing with enough, a terrible sickness plagued the kingdom. This beast did not take on a monstrous form like Oxy, but was deadly nonetheless. The entire kingdom was ordered to stay in their homes. Life as they knew it was over, at least for the time being. Unfortunately, this did not stop Oxy the dragon from bringing mayhem into the kingdom. In fact, more people began to perish due to the beast. The round table knew they had to act quickly. How would they continue to build on their triumphant momentum when no one could venture outside their homes? And the internet would not be invented for another 400 years. The round table assembled a communications committee to leverage every resource they could find. They searched high and low for ways to share key messages. They sent copies of the handbook with every raven and owl in sight. They arranged for the people to listen to the criers' messages through their windows. Their efforts never wavered. The moral of the story. This story does not have a happily ever after. Oxy the dragon remains a threat, but we have weakened him before and will do it again. There are, however, lessons to learn from this battle in the southern land of enchantment. First, just because something works with one part of the kingdom doesn't mean it will work in others. Actively and mindfully listen to those at your round table, for they are an extension of the people. Ask the kingdom for input earlier in the process. Finally, operating outside of a traditional work setting, with fresh coffee, of course, is the key to collaboration and creative feedback. The end.
That was great. That was incredibly creative and very fun. I think I can see a lot of chat here about how much people really loved it. So thank you so much for that presentation. Does anybody have any questions for the UP Coalition?
I might make a comment and just that, you know, it's a really nice representation of all of the effort that goes into making a handbook. So it's not just somebody sitting down at a table and writing in some numbers and designing things. So I think it's a great representation of a truly collaborative effort, and as well as all of the work that goes into it. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And if I can, I would just like to, I guess, pull some attention to a couple of parts of that story just quickly. So if you caught it, and Cristina Lopez Gutierrez is also saying in the chat that it's in Spanish too. It absolutely is. We got it translated. Thank you, Pyre, for helping with that. So a couple of notes for the the script. We said that the community, they brought out their torches and pitchforks, and they literally ripped up the book. So just kind of like some flashback to reality on how that looked. There was a focus group with 15 people that was actually happened down in the southern part of Doñana County. It was 15 parents and guardians. They were representing 3 different communities in southern Doñana County. I think they were all bilingual, if not 1 or 2 were monolingual Spanish speakers. So we kind of got to test the English book while also keeping in mind the coming Spanish translation. They were the most wonderful people. They were really very informative, and they really wanted to share. And that is no joke. They literally ripped up the book that we gave them and put it in an order that made sense to them and said, here, take this. This is what works. They were wonderful, but they were just like, they were very in your face with, when they went into it, they didn't know that that I was the coordinator and that I was there, on behalf of the RX committee, that we had designed this book. They kind of, thought that they were in like a safe place. They could tell their absolute truth, and they did, and it was wonderful. And also, I wanted to call attention to the meetings that took place over the fortnight. It was a little bit of a like, oh shoot, after that focus group, we're like, okay, we've got some work to do, some serious work to do. So the entire RX committee, every single one of them was represented at least one of those meetings. And we literally sketched out pen and paper what we wanted it to look like, and we implemented everything that the community said that they wanted. So I just kind of wanted to call attention to a couple of those things, and And just note that that's something that we've heard a lot from the RX committee. Definitely Athena has really talked about that. Like, we should do that more often. That was fun. It wasn't just like sitting in a committee meeting. It was like, we got to order coffee and we got to joke around a little bit. And then it was like, okay, let's get to work. Like, what's the language going to look like? What pictures are we going to use? And it was just the most wonderful process. So I just wanted to kind of call attention to those two things. And also note that there's a reason why I was not called the evil queen. I was not mean. I was just new. I was a newbie. But it was a wonderful process. And it was really, as a preventionist, it was a real lesson in, you know, use your team, be patient, really, really, truly think about what they're telling you, because they're the professionals and they're the branch to the community. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it, what I wanted to say.
I think there's a couple questions in the chat about what program did you use to develop your infographics?
So probably not the most professional program you could use. We really just did it on PowerPoint. We just kind of changed some of the alignments in PowerPoint. And if you go and download it off of our website, if you go to the CHI website, go to the Unified Prevention page, it's there for download. You'll see that there's some margin kind of errors on that page. And that's because it's a PowerPoint that prints specifically. So it's not the highest tech, but it worked out. Okay, I see here that Dr. Rubin was noting that a less formal setup for the UP Coalition was an easier thing to do, because in creating that first draft, the mess that we put out to the focus group, we were doing that in 40-minute committee meetings between other work, and it was just a rushed process. It was kind of stressful. And I think Dr. Rubin, if I'm reading you correctly here, that's what you're saying, is that the less formal, kind of more relaxed, longer stretches of time to work on it is what worked better for us. Gotcha.
I think the other question in the chat is, how do you develop your infographics and make it's more content focused question? But I don't know if you can kind of expand on that a little bit more on how you developed your infographic. How you decided the data you were going to put in, and it sounds like it's more coming from that focus group. Maybe you can confirm that.
Yes. You know, we definitely took the YRRS data, the NMCS data. We had, you know, all of the data sources. And I see, Paula, you're saying more specifically, what's your process to choose the pictures? We actually purchased some pictures from the, what is it called? It's not Shutterfly, Shutterstock, I believe, the website. We wanted to make sure that we did it all by the book, that we owned the images that we were going to print out and disseminate. So that was actually a big part of one of these 4-hour work sessions where we were working with the coalition members, is really, you know, pulling out pictures for them. I feel like that's kind of, I say that now, you know, with having some experience coordinating, that's my job, is to help the coalition to be successful. So I want to say I brought them like, you know, 20 something to 30 something images and said, okay, which ones do you like? Which ones don't you like? And then after we had them all picked out together, then we went back and put them where we thought that they should be. And also, as Christina is saying in the chat, we definitely asked about this. The first go around, we had a lot of icons everywhere, right? We thought we were being like cool and creative with some of the ways that we were using the icons. And the community was like, no, I don't like these little characters. I don't like these little guys. Give me some pictures. I want to see real people. And we just kind of were like, okay, we'll find them for you. You got it.
I just want to comment that I think it's so powerful to utilize focus groups when you're materials. And that is, I think I really love that process, because you get that straight up feedback from community, because though some of them are very like, you know, this this color doesn't work, or, you know, it's too flashy, or, you know, exactly on, you know, the images, you know, that doesn't make sense to me, or, you know, this is what we want to see. This is, so I'm really glad that that process went really well for you, in the fact that it's going to benefit the community at large to see their input being put into place. I think that's something that's so important, is when community gives you that feedback, that you implement it, or you're able to incorporate it into your work, because then they buy into your communication with them. They want to see it. They're like, oh yeah, you know, that was my feedback, or this is something that we want to see happen. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Tone. That was honestly the funnest part. If I could do a focus group every day, I would. It was a blast. Thank you all so much. And if you all, you know, want to talk about any of this stuff, feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat, and we can definitely talk about it. Oh, that's right. And Christina's also pointing out that we did a Spanish focus group during COVID, and we did it on Zoom, and it was the most interesting experience. Definitely let us know, like Christina said, if you do have focus groups on your scope of work this go around, and you want some tips and tricks and kind of some of the stuff that we learned the hard way, holler at us, because it's quite the process, but it's really rewarding.
And to echo what Tone said, and the rest of us are talking about with the focus groups, is that we're doing a process with BCCHC called Bootcamp Translation, that involves engaging one group of people over a series of interactions around a product. And I think that those folks can become your kind of key community stakeholders. They can become sort of your prevention experts. So it's kind of been a really wonderful, it's been a great lesson to learn in terms of pulling in people from the community and getting their sustained engagement. And rather than just doing like, let's pull together a focus group for this one little meeting and discussion, and then we'll do another one later. But if you're able to kind of gather together a team of people, they end up becoming more engaged and more sustained. Just what I think what Tone was mentioning is that, you know, those folks too will see reap the benefits of their efforts and be able to contribute to the work that you're doing moving forward as well.
Well, thanks everyone. That was, again, it was a great presentation. We're gonna break now for lunch. And before we do, I just wanna remind you that the webinar is gonna continue. There's gonna be some community engagement tools and some cartoons that will be presented by Ricardo Cate, and they'll play across the screen. And we're gonna hear more about those in the next presentation after lunch. That's on the Native American COVID-19 Prevention Media Campaign. So please stay logged into the webinar, mute yourselves and pause your camera, and have a good lunch, and we'll see you back at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everyone.